Well, guys, let me tell you a story. When I was a kid, I wanted to learn how to cook. And so watching my family, I grew up in a small little house in Stanford. And my family used to do something. They used to save bacon grease in a coffee can, okay? After they'd cooked, they put it in there, and there was a little drawer on the stove that was in our kitchen, and you pull out the stove. And so one day I decided to go in the kitchen, pull out a pan, slapped a big old dab of bacon grease in the pan, started heating the thing up to high, and started cooking. Well, lo and behold, to my shock, because I had never really cooked on my own before, there was a fire that started in the pan, okay? So I freaked out, and so I went over to the sink, which was right next to the stove, and I grabbed a glass of water and threw it on the pan to put out the fire, right? And some of you already know where this is going. Well, guess what? Water and grease don't mix. So the fire only spread. Then I freaked out, and we do some of the most stupid things when we panic, right? So full-blown panic mode. The fire is going, so I have this idea that pops into my mind. Grab the pan and run out the house. So I immediately grab a cast iron skillet with my bare hand, get about 2 steps, as you can imagine, burn my hand, drop it on the floor, burn a hole in the floor. Thank God somebody was home to help come put the fire out. There was some fire on my backside later, if you know what I'm talking about. But what's the point of my story? You all know as well as I do. If there was a fire in your house, you would do everything in your power to put it out. Why? Because if you don't put it out, it could potentially lose everything. It could burn everything down. Well, welcome. Today is a series we've been in called Heart Attack, 4 warning signs. We're talking about 4 conditions that have the ability to do damage in our heart. And that's where today's story is. This one is the most damaging of all. But in that end of it, we've learned this, that like our physical heart, our spiritual heart has similarities. And we know that the number one cause of death in America is heart disease, okay? And so spiritually speaking, the number one cause of destroying lives is issues that lodge in the human heart that create havoc and problems. And so we're looking at 4 of them. And today is the second installment of a heart exam. Yeah, today I'm shooting a die in. We're going to put the light of God's word on it, find out if there's any blockages. You know, it's a little stressful, a little difficult, but guess what? Why do people go through heart exams at the doctor's office, get on that treadmill, do all of that stuff? Because if they discover a blockage, you can do something about it before it terminates your life. Well, what my hope today is that you would discover something that could create havoc and terminate relationships, difficulties, and create havoc in your life. Last week, we dealt with the first, because all of these that we're looking at create a debtor relationship that weigh in our hearts. And last week, we talked about the issue of guilt. If you weren't here, you can watch any of these messages online and kind of catch up on that end. And guilt says what? I owe you. Because all of us have been in a position where we've hurt somebody. We've done damage to somebody else because of a wrong we did. And we deal with the issue of guilt, which says, I owe you. So there's a way to find freedom. If you weren't here, you can go and find that message, plus the prescription that I wrote for your freedom, okay? But today, out of 4 of the issues, today here's the title: Anger, You Owe Me. Like somebody hurts someone else and they create a debt that they owe them, well, today we're dealing with the opposite side of that end. Anger, you owe me. You hurt me. You did me wrong. You did something to create havoc. You did something that was unfair, unjust, not right. And so you owe me. And out of the 4 conditions that vie for control of our heart, this one's the most obvious, but at the same time, the most damaging, the most devastating. If you've ever grown up in an angry household, I grew up in a very violent and angry home, and so I understand and know the damage on that end of it. In fact, one of the things that plagues the American culture is domestic violence. Why is it when there's a murder, the very first people they start checking out are family members? Because anger has this way of creating damage. Because anger is like a bomb going off. There is a blast radius, and there is collateral damage. Because even though someone may be angry at one person, when that blast goes off, there are others that catch shrapnel in the way. Two spouses begin to argue, kids get in the way of it. Two friends begin to argue, others that are around get in. And all of a sudden, when you might be directed, you think at one person, anger is like a blast of a bomb. And there is collateral damage. It is difficulty. So let me tell you the truth right up front. This is a hard pill to swallow, but it's true. Anger is the result of not getting our way, not getting what we want. Now you like push back, no, Pastor Ken, no. No way. See, anger is about not getting what you feel you deserve, or maybe you do deserve. And that's where it comes from, because why? Angry people are hurt people. Angry people got hurt somewhere along the way. And here's the unfortunate reality of life. Hurt people hurt people. Whether intentionally or unintentionally, you owe me. So therefore, when people get angry and anger lodges in the heart, it imprisons the heart to this idea. So you and I need to see this, because listen to me. Angry people carry this weight within them, and they feel that the remedy to dealing with it is payback. Come on, Hollywood has made millions of dollars creating movies about people paying them back, right? And we figure, that's how you settle debts, right? They need to pay you back. But here's the problem. When we want payback, we become the judge, jury, and executioner. And what is right? We fail to realize that the only righteous judge is God. And God said this, vengeance is mine, and I will repay, saith the Lord. And why? Because here's the point. Paying back evil for evil never makes things right. Two wrongs don't make a right. And think about it if you're honest. If somebody really hurts you and you think about payback, usually it's not pleasant. Usually it's pretty dark. Usually it's very painful. But evil for evil never creates justice. And the amazing part about us as human beings, when we've been hurt, think about this for a moment. When we've been hurt, you know what we want? Justice, right? They need to pay. Something needs to happen, right? But when we're the offending party, you know what we want? If we're honest, we don't want justice in that moment. We want what? Mercy, right? And so the fact is this, what you and I need to recognize, listen to me, this is so critical, that the thing you want payback for, most of the time, it can never, ever be paid back. How do you pay somebody back for a lost childhood? How do you pay a woman back for sexual abuse? See, most of the things we want payback for, there is no way to pay back. It's a tragedy. It's something that's wrong, but it can't be paid back. And so in essence, when we allow anger to lodge into our heart, we become a slave we become imprisoned. We want something that absolutely can't actually happen. And we begin to, when anger lodges in the heart, like we said, everything flows from the heart. When anger lodges in the heart, we begin to take on an ideal that everybody owes me. And so it goes off. People who are angry are like a volcano, okay? A volcano looks like a normal mountain until what? Till it erupts. Do you know who the people that know we're angry the most? It's the people who love us and are closest to us. But they're too afraid to tell us because they don't want that volcano to erupt because they've been burned by the lava before. And so angry people carry around. And so when anger goes off, it's never usually adjacent to what happens. So like the waitress didn't bring your thing correct. Angry people are mean people. Angry people can be very demanding. Angry people can be very rude because angry people can justify just about anything because they feel that it's all right. Because if you knew what happened to me, if you grew up in the house that I grew up in, if you had this person do to you what they did to me, then you would understand. And we use it as an excuse and a justification. Because why? Victimization fuels anger. And victimization fuels justification. So angry people can justify just about anything. And the problem is this, again, listen to me. You and I need to realize, I guess, if I were to sit with you and hear your story, we all have a story. I'd probably be heartbroken like, yeah, I understand while you're angry. You know, last year when I was in a mental health clinic, I met a young man. My first encounter with him, I'm like, whoa, this dude is really angry. I mean, we didn't even know each other, just exchanging names. But this young man, when I sat with him and listened to his story, on a college spring break, he had gone with a group of people on a trip to Cuba. And so when he was in Havana, he was out partying with a group of people, and they were in this town square area. And there was this, they were all drinking, having, party fun, all the rest of this. And a guy was driving down the road, had been drinking himself, but the brakes on his vehicle went out, and he drove into a crowd of people, killing a number of them. And this young man was injured badly, his leg. He had to have a couple of surgeries. He had to have a rod implanted in him, and he was angry. And I was like, dude, I get it, man. That sucks. That's horrible. But here is the question that I want to ask all of you. It's a question I asked him. It's a question I want to ask all of you. How long are you going to allow what happened to you control your life? How long are you going to allow the people who hurt you to control you? I mean, how long? Take out your calendar right now. Take out your iPhone. Put it a day. A week? A month? 3 months? 6 months? A year? 5 years? 10 years? How long? You're like, well, Pastor Ken, that's silly. No, it's sick. Because anger is heart disease. And today, I want to help you get free. Today, I want to give you the prescription. Because you're the only one who can. That's what you need to understand, because listen to me. You can the only one that can answer that question. Why? Because you have a choice. Remember we came into this year, I told you the first series of the years will overlay everything we do. You always have a choice. This is a year for wholeness. Will you be made whole? Why did Jesus ask that man at the pool? Because he had a choice. And today, what my hope is that you will make a decision, that you will actually have the courage to say, you know what, if that's what's necessary, I'm ready. I'm tired of being in this situation. I'm tired of allowing my past to control my future. I want to be free. Because today, the prescription for your freedom, we're going to deal with. Why? Because listen to me. Only you can. You have a choice to that end. And sometimes our story, it needs to come to light. Sometimes we need to shed light on it so that you can see it from another perspective. Because sometimes we tell that story to ourselves again and again and again. And the more you do, it's like adding gas to an already burning fire. And today, because some of you, listen, some of us have become masters. You tell your story and you refuel the situation and you want sympathy from others. And often we want to justify and excuse behaviors. So we tell the story. But listen to me. I want to help you to get free, because the true way to tell your story that's powerful is when it becomes a testimony of God leading you to find the freedom and forgiveness necessary to heal your heart, to release you, to get you to be free from the anger that is sought to control you. So here's the big idea today. Listen to me. Anger short fuse only ensures you lose. Because that's the problem. See, anger, people who are angry have a short fuse. It don't take a whole lot to let them, someone just has to mess up an order. Somebody has to be on their cell phone while checking you out at the store, and you're ready to lose your cool. You're ready to walk, right? Come on. Angry people can be rude. But listen to me. The Apostle Paul weighed in on this. If you have a Bible, you can turn here. In Ephesians chapter 4, the Apostle Paul gives us not only the understanding about the cure to this, and right away I can hear you, listen. You're sitting there thinking, what does a guy 2,000 years ago, Pastor Ken, have any idea how could that be relevant to what's going on? Because let me tell you what happened in my life. If Paul was around, he might have something different to say if he knew the situations I had been in. But let me tell you this. Consider the source. Because Paul is what he's writing to you. He's not writing from a beach in Sardinia while he was on vacation. He writes what he writes from a prison cell in Rome. And why was Paul in prison? What had he done? He had testified about Jesus. People were mean to him. People created problems. People lied about him. Paul had all of this. In fact, if you want to read what Paul experienced in his journey, if there was anybody who had a reason to be angry, it would have been the Apostle Paul. Because he was beaten with rods. He was whipped. He was in a seat. All these things that Paul went through. And guess what? When Paul wrote from prison, guess what he didn't write? He didn't write, "Oh, my dear brothers and sisters, I want you to know what's happened to me really sucks. I'm so angry. I'm so upset that God allowed this to happen." Come on, be honest. Some of you may be in a situation where you can even be angry at God, and it's okay. Do you know what? God can handle your anger. Because a lot of you are angry, and you're too afraid to even admit you're angry at God. That young man was not afraid to tell me how angry he was at God, because if there is a God, he said to me, then why did he allow this to happen? God can't be good and can't be just at the same time. And maybe, just maybe, some of you would be honest enough to admit you've had similar feelings. But Paul doesn't write that. Paul actually has the moral authority to realize, because here's the thing I need you to understand. You can't be a victim and a victor at the same time. You have to make a choice. You have to make a decision. You have to turn in your victim card so you can take the victor card. Because Paul said, what has happened to me, this is such a mature idea. He said, listen, what's happened to me has actually furthered the gospel. All of this, these temporary light afflictions are working in me a far more eternal weight of glory, because I don't look at the things that are seen, but the things that are unseen. Because the things that are seen are temporal, but the things that are unseen are eternal. In other words, listen to me. God can take what the enemy meant for evil and turn that for good. In other words, listen to me. God can turn your pain into a platform. God can turn your misery into ministry. Because when you allow God to work in your heart, Paul had understood and realized that I am free. I'm not upset at all of these people that put me in this situation. I trust that God has freed me from the anger that could absolutely control my life. So Paul writes, and listen to what he writes. In Ephesians 4 and verse 26, listen to what it says. And he says, and don't sin by letting anger control you. Now, some translations say it this way: be angry and sin not. Why? And the reason I chose this one is because, listen to me, there is an unrealistic idea that, I'm a Christian, I never get angry. Well, I'm going to tell you what, I get angry. When I see child abuse, when I see, exploitation, when I see pedophilia, when I see things that are like, what? Okay? But listen to me. Getting angry is human. Letting it control you is not. And that's the problem, is when anger controls you. Because why? Angry people know this to be true. And if you're one of them, just say amen. It's all right. There's healing. Because here's the point. Angry people say and do things that they later regret. And if you've ever been there, you know that. Now you're trying to make amends and trying to heal things because you were hurt and you allowed your hurt to remain so implanted in you that now your anger hurt somebody else and you're trying to make it right and you perpetuate the pain. Today, I want you to find freedom. Today, I want you to get delivered. Today, I want you to know that you can make a choice. Because why? Your pain doesn't have to continue causing pain. There is freedom and healing. So do not let your anger, because again, don't let it control your words and actions. Okay? Don't sin by letting your anger control you. And then he says this, don't let the sun go down while you are still angry. This was a proverb in Paul's day. In other words, Paul was saying this, that you and I need to recognize whatever season you're in. Now, I heard this taken so literally. When I first got saved, I heard these recommendations. Hey, if you want to have a good marriage, don't go to bed angry. So there are some couples that try to work through that, and so they stay up all night trying to work it out, trying to figure this out. It's not necessarily literal, but it does mean this. Before you go into something new, settle what was old. It's what I call the principle of entering and leaving, because the way you leave a situation is how you enter another. And I've seen people that their marriage ended in divorce, but they're so stinking angry, they may get remarried, but they take that anger into the new marriage, and now they're creating havoc, they're creating problems. Why? You got fired from a job, you think your employer was wrong, and maybe they were, but if you don't settle it, if you don't do it, you're going to go into the next job with the anger you carried from the last job, and that's the problem. We've been carrying around a lot of junk. You got to put it out. Listen to me. If you've ever gone camping and you had a campfire out there, you don't need Smokey the Bear to tell you this, okay? That you got to make sure that fire is totally out. Why? Because any part that's smoldering, and that's the problem, that there are aspects of people in the room that you got smoldering realities, that maybe somebody else can't detect it, but the slightest little wind that comes along, a twig that falls on it, and the flame, boosh, okay? And here's the point. Can I be pastoral for a moment? If you're dating somebody and you recognize they have an anger problem, can I give you some pastoral advice? Get out of that situation now. Till they settle those issues. Why? Because I guarantee you continue on, you will get hurt. And it will be devastational. So please hear my heart. I love you. They need to settle that before they get into a new situation. Don't let the anger go down. Why? And why is all this important, Paul? And guys, if you've been sleeping through the rest of this, you've been shopping on eBay, if you've checked out, this is the area where I need you to pay attention. Why is all of this so important? Because verse 27 is such a revelation that you and I need to understand. Why, Paul? Why is it important to not let sin, anger cause us to sin and the sun to go down on our anger? Because why? Verse 27, for anger gives a foothold to the devil. You want to give the devil control? You want to give him the upper hand? You want to give him the chain that takes you, the choke collar that has been leading you around on for years? You've been in slavery to a situation, and every time you get out of it, he just pulls it back a little bit. Your anger goes off, you blaze, and you're trapped. You're under the control. Why? Because he's got a foothold in you. Today, I want to perform surgery. Because it's time to free your heart from anger. Because why? Here's the prescription, guys. Here's the prescription. The prescription for anger is forgiveness. That may seem oversimplified, but listen to me. There are three groups of people when you talk about forgiveness, and some of you all may be in different categories here, but usually when I'm talking to a crowd of people, there's usually three groups. Number one, people who want to forgive who just can't. They keep living it again. The feelings keep coming up. They're having nightmares. They get up. They can't, everywhere they go, they're reminded about it. They know they need to, but they just can't. Then you get a second group of people who don't have the courage to do so. Why? Because they think if I forgive, it's letting the other person off the hook. And that's not right. They need to pay. They need to do, that ain't right. So I'm not going to do it. Like you think you're holding something over them. Okay? And then there's the third group who have tried. But the feelings just keep coming back again and again and again. But today, I want to help you to get unstuck. If you're in any of those ends, because it's important. Jesus weighed in on this and taught us the importance of the power of forgiveness, because the one that you're damaging when you don't forgive is yourself. The people you're angry at usually are probably sleeping a good night's sleep. It's you that's up all night. It's you that's on Malanta. It's you that's constantly having ulcers and all the rest of the stuff. But listen, Matthew 18, if you grew up in church, you're probably familiar with this story that Jesus told. But listen to the start of this. Because one of Jesus' disciples, Peter, comes to him. And look at what it says. Matthew 18 and verse 21 says, Then Peter came to Jesus and asked, Lord, how many times shall I forgive my brother and sister who sins against me? And a lot of times we're asking God situations like that because we want to know what's the minimum we need to do to get by. I mean, if you can't say amen, say oh me. You know it's true. We try. How far can I go, Pastor Ken, without going too far? Because I want to know how close I can get to the fire without getting burned. We often ask the wrong questions. And Peter wants to know because we're looking for limits. Give me the limit. And then Peter says this. Peter says up to 7 times. Now, to put this into context to you, you got to realize the way Peter was raised. The leading rabbis of the nation of Israel at the time taught that to forgive once was human. To forgive twice was going beyond that. But to forgive 3 times was divine. So Peter, he doubles it and adds one in for good measure. Because when he says this, I think he's expecting Jesus to go, whoa, dog, you killed it. That was awesome. Are you kidding me? 7 times? But Jesus does not answer it that way. Shock Peter. We're going to shock a bunch of you. But listen, how did Jesus answer? Jesus answered, I tell you, not 7 times, but 77 times. Some of your translations say 7 times 7. Here's the point. Or 70 times 7. What do you know what he said? What he was saying? Forgiveness is unlimited. Stop trying to count it. It's unlimited. And why? Because then he tells the reason why. And why this is so important. He goes into this story. Therefore, the kingdom of heaven is like a king who wanted to settle accounts with his servants. Now, if you don't get it, let me help you to translate this. The king that Jesus is talking about is God the Father. Okay? And so he says this. Therefore, the kingdom of heaven is like a king who wanted to settle accounts with his servants. And as he began a settlement, a man owed him 10,000 bags of gold. That was brought to him. Now, I don't know how much money that is, but it's more than he could pay in a lifetime. That's a lot of money. That's a lot of bling, I'm telling you, okay? So what? And since he was not able to pay, the master ordered that he and his wife and his children and all that he had be sold to repay the debt. At this, the servant fell on his knees before him. Be patient with me, he begged, and I will pay back everything. The servant's master, listen, took pity on him. Some translations say had compassion on him. And what? Canceled the debt. That's what the true definition of forgiveness is. To cancel the debt. And you and I need to know that's exactly what God the Father did to you for us. He canceled our debt. Could we ever pay back God for what we owe him for the sin that we've committed? But how often do we forget that? How often are we become narrow-minded, short-sighted, blinded by our own anger that we forget what God has released us from? But here, he releases the man. Could the man, no, it was a gift. It was a gift, right? And so what? But here it says this. And so, but when the servant went out, he found one of his fellow servants who owed him 100 silver coins. Now, I heard this taught when I first became a Christian, like it was a pittance, like it was $5. No, 1,000 silver coins is why I chose this translation. It's more accurate in this respect. It's about 1/3 of a year's income. Now, I don't know how much you make, but that's not a pittance. It's not nothing. And when somebody's hurt you, it's not that it's nothing. But if you were to compare it to what we've done to God, how our sin has hurt God, that's what we forget. And that's what happened. Look at what happens in this story. He met this man who owes him 100 silver coins. He grabbed him and began to choke him. Pay back what you owe me, he demanded. And his fellow servant fell on his knees and begged him, be patient with me, and I will pay you back. Does that sound familiar? Isn't that what this guy just had gone through with the king? But he refused. Instead, he went off and had the man thrown into prison until he could pay the debt. How's he going to pay it if he's in prison? Do you ever think of that? And when the other servants saw what happened, they were outraged and went and told the master everything that had happened. And the master called the servant in. How many of you know that God looks at things so different than we do? We can justify a million reasons why forgiving somebody else isn't right. No, yes, God, thank you for forgiving me. But no, I'm not forgiving that dirty, that flea-bitten varmint. Are you kidding me? They don't deserve it. Do you know what they did to me? God says, yes. Do you want to be whole? So he said to the man, look at how God says it. The master called the servant in. He said, you wicked servant. God calls unforgiveness wickedness. Why? Why does God call it wickedness? Because God loves you so much, anything that hurts you angers him. And unforgiveness is a prison of your own making. God has already made the way possible for us to forgive. And to not allow, to hold on to things that hurt you, anger your Father, because he loves you. Because he cares for you. Well, if he loves me, why doesn't he do something about it? Because you're the only one that can let it go. You're the only one that can release it and cancel the debt. And so what does he say? He said, you wicked servant, I canceled all the debt of yours because you begged me to. Shouldn't you, this is how God looks at it, shouldn't you have had mercy on your fellow servant just as I had on you? That's what God says to you and I. Shouldn't you? You can't give what you don't have. But all of us have been given a gift. We've all been forgiven by God. And because we've been forgiven, we can give freely what we have received freely. And when we don't, we hurt ourselves. It says this, in anger, the master handed him over to the jailers to be tormented until he should pay back all he owed. And this is how my heavenly Father will treat each of you unless you forgive your brother or sister from where? From your heart. See, the only way to free yourself from anger's control is to cancel the debt. Is to cancel the debt. Let's go back to where the Apostle Paul led off. Remember I said he gave the prescription? Back in Ephesians 4, verse 31, look what he says. Get rid of all bitterness, rage, anger, harsh words, and slander, as well as all types of evil behavior. Do you know what all of those things that are just named are tied to? Anger. Because you know what bitterness is? When you dwell on what's been done to you, when you think about how unjust it was and you allow that to creep into your heart, all of a sudden you get angry, upset. Bitter people are upset at the world because of what happened to them. It all stems, these are all rage, all of these things are the outgrowths of when anger becomes lodged in the human heart. And what does Paul say? Get rid of it. Well, that's easy to write, Paul. Come on. That's unreasonable. Come on, dude, you're not living in my world. You're not experiencing it. Paul, if you had happened to me, like I said, consider the source. You ever want to read on what happened to the Apostle Paul? But listen, Paul had the moral authority because this is how he lived. This is what he discovered. He said, get rid of it. In fact, I love it. In Greek, it means literally put it in the trash. Take it outside. Get rid of it. Why are you letting it live in your house? He said what? In verse 32, and here's where the prescription comes in. Instead, be kind to each other and tender-hearted, forgiving one another. Now, if the period was there, that would seem so unreal. That would be so idealistic that, come on, Pastor Ken, that's not even real. But why? Notice there's not a period, there's a comma. Because this next phrase is what makes it all possible. Forgiving one another just as God, through Christ, has forgiven you. And here's what you need to understand. We can forgive because we've been forgiven. What you and I need to realize that forgiven people forgive people. When you fail to realize what God has released you from, then your heart becomes hard. Then you become embittered. Then you become angry, upset, and fuel it with victimization. Because victimization fuels justification. And we make the rational excuses of why it's all right for us to be this way. But the only one we're hurting is ourselves. The only one we're keeping in bondage is ourselves. And the way out of prison is forgiveness. That's how you walk free from the man-made cell that holds you bound. I asked you before, and I want you to answer it to yourself. How long are you going to allow what happened to you control you? How long are you going to allow the people who hurt you to control your life any longer? A week? A month? A year? Some people I've met are holding on to it for 20 years and can tell the story like it was yesterday. See, the way out is freedom. So, Dr. Ken wrote you a prescription. Because forgiveness is a decision, not a feeling. And so you can download this. The QR code is there. I'm going to encourage you to go through this exercise, guys. Here is my prescription. And like any doctor's prescription, what do you need to do? You go home and take the pills as prescribed. If you want to understand the cycle of forgiveness, I wrote it out for you clearly. But my hope is that you would take time with you and God and identify these things, however long it takes for you on this front. But here, let me walk through it real quickly. You can read it. There's far more I put within it. But listen to me. Forgiveness is a process. This is the full cycle of it, okay? There are 4 phases that must take place to complete the cycle of forgiveness. Number 1, identify the person who hurt us and that we're angry with. You think, well, that's ridiculous. No. You need to be specific. And here's the thing that is problematic. When people try generalized forgiveness, it doesn't work. If a surgeon is going to go in and correct something in you, don't you want them to be precise? Don't you want them to only cut what needs to be cut? Right? When it comes to the issue of forgiveness, you have to be direct. You have to be precise. Who is it that you're angry with? Okay? Number 2, determine what they owe you. That's what often gets missed. What do they owe you? Did they run off with someone else? Did they break up with you? Did they cheat on you? What do they owe you? Do they owe you a first marriage? Do they owe you a first date? Whatever it is. I don't know what somebody did to hurt you, but what do they owe you? You need to ask yourself the question, because listen to me. How can you release a debt if you haven't even identified what the debt is? What do they owe you? What do they owe you? Number 3, cancel the debt. I'll tell people, once you've identified this, sometimes write it out. I am today canceling the debt. They don't owe me anything anymore. That has to become the language, because when feelings come back, when your mother wants to talk about the situation again, you got to say, they don't owe me anymore. When your friends come around or people from your past and they want to talk about where you've been and the wrong that's happened to you, you got to say, whoa, let me stop you. They don't owe me anything anymore. I have canceled the debt. I have released the situation. Can I tell you this? Good friends don't let their friends wallow in self-pity. That hurts people. That doesn't help people. You need someone who loves you enough to say, you know what? Let me come along beside you, but we're going to stop talking about this. We're going to put this to bed. We're going to get rid of this. I'm going to help you. I'll be here for you, but you need to cancel the debt. You need to let go of the situation. Why? Because the 4th one is this: dismiss the case. In other words, it's over. It's over, Rover. The books are closed. There's no longer a debt owed. We don't need to adjudicate this anymore. We're not going to relitigate this anymore. We're not going to let people bring this back up and jump into it. No. When somebody wants to talk about it, you can say, case closed. It's over. They don't owe me anymore. The books have already been filed. The case is closed. No longer is there a debt open. It's closed. I have canceled the debt. And people who love you come along beside you to help you to walk out and navigate that reality. Simple? Yeah. Easy? No. I know it's tough. I know it's not easy. Take the time that's necessary. But don't let the sun go down on your anger. Settle the matter. Allow the cycle, because forgiveness is a process. It may take a little time, but it's worth the effort, because only forgiveness can release you from the oppressive nature of anger that controls and has the ability to burn down every part of your life. Every head bowed, every eye closed. Father in heaven, give us the courage today to be honest with ourselves. I know taking a heart exam, Lord, is never easy. It's been stressful sometimes in this room. But yet, Lord, My heart's desire is that all of us would discover the blockages in areas where our hearts have been affected by the things that the enemy has tried to do to control us. The things that the enemy has brought to try to affect our hearts, because everything flows from our hearts, Lord. So I want all in this room to be whole. So the place to start is the condition of our heart. So Lord, expose the areas. Help us to see where there's blockages. Help us to see where there's anger that's resident, where there's smoldering issues, that we can actually extinguish the fire, put out the flame, to move on, to put it behind, to walk on into freedom. And that's what my prayer is today, that everyone would find the courage. So help us to walk through these exercises. Tonight is, oh, that's another nice message, and go on. But to take the opportunity, download that area, review the issue, and walk through the cycle, the process, and let go and release. And walk out of that self-made prison that unforgiveness has forged.